Packed room here today at the Hertie School in Berlin. We had a lot of registered participants, as it's obvious, and we're very glad that so many of you came today because we have very high expectations for this event. And we'd like to welcome the guys from Jongens van de Tekeningen. They're coming from Amsterdam.
No.
Rotterdam. Sorry. It's a very important difference. From Rotterdam. And we met them a couple of weeks ago at a conference in Oxford University that was dedicated to the future of research, communications, and e-scholarship. And then we made quick contact. We had already loved their work, which we had seen online. They had been doing drawings for this conference also in their previous version. And once we met them there and realized that they were also coming to Berlin, we ended up organizing this event together. And when I say we, part of that is a new project, actually a startup called Onda Politica, which you can visit us on our website, ondapolitica.org. And I'd like to begin the workshop simply by giving 5, maximum 10 minutes of an introduction into the vision of what we're doing, and then give the stage to the guys from Jongens, where they go to go on with the workshop. I'd love to ask, how many of you have seen a video of the pitching that we did there at Oxford? Just to be curious. All right, maybe like 4 or 5 people. This is going to be a similar but nonetheless different version of what happened there. And we would like to start by talking about the field that we're concentrating in, that it's the field of public policy. And here is a character, we call him Lucas, and it's someone that you could call a traditional character in this field. It's someone all of you who are in this field already know, and those of you who are here today who are not directly linked to the field of research in public policy might already know that this sort of person exists. He's a traditional researcher, and he usually has as output of his work a PDF paper, right? That is published in specialized journals. Things like citation counts and reputation among peers are the incentives that matter most to Lucas, and therefore this particular product, the paper that is usually long, technical, black and white, static, still today usually behind paywalls. Those of us who are writing our thesis today know what that means. This output is, the most critical product of the work that Lucas does. But the process of getting to that output implies a lot of things. The research process is complex, and while Lucas carries it out, he collects a massive amount of leftovers, tables, databases, photographs, recorded interviews, notes taken by hand that usually are lost. If we're lucky, they stay in their hard drive, but otherwise they get deleted, right? And the interesting thing about the field of public policy is that on the other side, you have a very different sort of person. Someone like Monica. Monica is also a typical character of this field, but she lives on the side of practice. She's carrying here an action box. Right? You can imagine that she's a mid-level government official in a country like Germany or Brazil or Colombia or the UK or China, you name it. And Monica today is under increasing pressure to design more evidence-based, more effective policies and programs in the kinds of things that she does. This is the action box. She wants to translate information into practice under a lot of constraints, including time to begin with, but many others beyond time. And she has this constant need, right, that we believe isn't being satisfied because there's this huge white gap separating someone like Lucas from someone like Monica. And Onda Politica, this project we began with Bruno and Caio together. We're here students at the Hertie School of Governments in the 2nd year of the Masters of Public Policy. About a year ago, we realized that even though we had different backgrounds, we were very concerned about this blank, world, and about how we could close it and build things to put Monica and Lucas, people like them, closer together, interacting in both directions. And of course, the question is, how can we fill this gap? In the beginning, we thought that we needed to build something from scratch. We thought that we would need to innovate something very basic, but in time we realized that there are already tools out there that need to be explored and combined and developed to begin filling out that gap, building a bridge. Here are some logos of very cool tools that we found. You'll be free to explore them later. You'll get a link to this presentation, obviously. And here you might find digital tools like Scalar or Creativist that allow building user-centered narratives that bring multimedia and interactivity together to produce informational pieces that are built for broader audiences, that are built in a way that the users are brought into the center of the stage. But it's not limited to digital online tools. We're also thinking about the offline world. This is a very powerful example we found, created by the MIT Media Lab and the Center for Civic Media there. They have this project called Data Murals. So they go with research projects that MIT produces to communities where those projects matter. And together with the community, they produce a mural that represents something important, an important message from the project to the community. This is from Belo Horizonte in Brazil. It's one of those nice examples. And the tools that we're thinking about, they go beyond just things that you can use. They go into the world of human capital. And here is where people like Jongens and Tekeningen and visual thinking as a tool comes in. We believe that this sort of thing that is happening today is precisely what needs to be happening in order to bridge this gap between people like Lucas and Monica. And this is why we believe that the space will remain blank unless we do the kinds of things that we're doing today, namely actually building the capabilities in researchers and changing our mindsets so that we can start doing our work and communicating it in a way that we start thinking about people like Monica along the entire process. And with this idea in mind, we've already carried out hands-on workshops in places like Sao Paulo and here in the Hertie School about 3 months ago. This workshop is just another one in a series that we hope will continue in the future, in which we want to explore and combine these tools with people as diverse as you. That being said, we think the combination of these tools and capability building makes a sort of prism. It's a metaphor that translates the white light, think of it that way, coming out of research, the leftovers and the actual outputs that Lucas produces, and translates them into these multicolored narratives that people like Monica can actually engage with within her constraints and needs. And we don't think it's limited to people like Monica. It extends beyond people that are practitioners in the strict sense of the word, namely working in government or in NGOs, or like directly in the front, so to speak. We're also talking about academic peers in other disciplines that might not share the same language that we're using. We're talking about publishers that are interested in bringing this kind of content out into the world. Journalists, right? That today are like, in need of this information that researchers can produce to bring it out there, and even common citizens that can use this type of information in their daily lives. We believe that this idea of communicating research cannot work fully just by itself. Producing research, and this is a nice picture that these guys drew maybe 2 years ago. It has to be linked with the communication of research in order for it to work. It's not that these are two different worlds and that some people are going to be doing this kind of work and other people this kind of work. That might happen sometimes, but in order for the system to actually bridge that gap, we're convinced that the production of the research itself should be done in a way that provides the sort of background that a new sort of communication for a broader audience needs. Changing the verb publishing for releasing, right? And we are trying to bring these ideas into practice right now with a prototype. It's our master's thesis here at the Hertie School, and it's about sustainability in agrarian reform in Brazil. Our thesis partner is the Brazilian Institute for Agrarian Reform, so we want to bring the thesis to them, government officials in the South, and we want them to use it, right? And we know that if we give them a 40-page long black and white PDF paper, no one there is going to read it. So the kind of thing we're thinking right now is like, okay, how can we use these tools, including visual thinking, to bring something like our thesis to our research partner? We're going to talk a lot more about this project later today, some details. This is a poster we presented there at Oxford with a lot of text because it's supposed to be self-explanatory. But we will talk more about this today and use it as an example. And with that introduction, I would love to welcome you all here to the workshop in the name of Onda Politica, our startup that's bringing about joining other startups together and bringing people like you into the scene to change the current state of affairs in the production and communication of policy research. And the guys from Jongens, for which we're very, very thankful today to be here. Thanks a lot, guys. It's a great opportunity. Okay. So with the excitement, I would love to thank the Hertie Student Association who have been funding these events, and again this time we're very grateful. They are making this sort of thing possible, the materials that we're using, and we're going to have a couple of breaks. You'll find coffee here, some fruits and cookies and croissants, so feel free to energize there when we get to the break. Thanks a lot.
All right, awesome. Yeah. Thanks a lot for the introduction, and yeah, also thanks a lot for this great opportunity and your presence here. It's truly humbling to be in front of such a big crowd and like this many smart people. It's going to be, I think you're going to have an interesting afternoon.
This is our biggest group yet. We've done this well, many times before, but never with this many people at the same time. We are these guys. All of us are almost there. We're all in Berlin though. Guys? Only Bob and the Thomas are not here, but the rest, I am Piet. That is Robert, you saw him. There's sitting with Nata. See, there's Willem, and there's Mark. Mark and I, and I think you guys also, Mark and I mainly will be walking around here, helping you out while the other guys are telling you all about visual thinking and letting you do drawing practice stuff. This is our university. Or, yeah, we studied already, we're all graduated. This is where we come from, it's in Delft, it's in Holland. And we all, almost everybody of us studied industrial design engineering, which I think I was at connection with drawing. There is a little bit of drawing, of course, in it, but there is always a vague part in the beginning of a design project where you have to get difficult information and structure it and make it clear. And that's what we really thought was interesting. And that's why we started Jongens from the Tekeningen to really exploit that. See, this is some material on what you can read to really learn design drawing. But this is not really what we are going to focus on. We are going to focus on really basic and simple drawings, and not to try to make them too beautiful, but to try to make it functional. This is our office. We just moved, I think, a couple of months ago to Rotterdam. Before we were in Delft. Really happy at our new place now. I don't know how long is my introduction. Yeah, this is all long enough. Is this working, this show? We made a little movie. Somebody made a movie for us, showing us what we do. Quick, and what you see is that there's a lot of different ways to use drawings, but what it all combines is that we make drawings. So in all kinds of ways, all kinds of shapes and forms. And very quickly about visual thinking and what we are going to tell you about today is that it's about drawing, but drawing is only maybe the final step. First you have to practice abstract thinking and try to do some storytelling and really try to understand what your story is. And then the final part is really drawing it. So drawing is just a small part of the whole visual thinking Venn diagram as it is here. So here's some examples of, you saw us a couple of in the movie, but this is just some examples of what we can do. We draw detailed drawings, color drawings, sometimes more simple, sometimes during sessions. And these are some more detailed ones. You can see that it's structured in layers sometimes, and these are really full color drawings, but that doesn't always remain necessary. It makes it prettier, but as you're going to find out, pretty is not always necessary. Sometimes it's just nice. These are some stuff we do during sessions, so like sessions like today, but what if we were just brainstorming, we could just sit by your table, listen to what you're saying, and just start drawing out your ideas and hang them on the walls. And what you're going to see is that visual thinking really starts getting you thinking. So you see something, what you were thinking and saying, but you see it on paper in the drawing, and it makes you think more. And this way you get into a kind of loop, just seeing drawings and thinking about it and iterating on it. This is also, I think, what you guys saw us doing in Oxford. We also make really big drawings, and just it's really impressive to do it. often with conferences where a lot of speakers and keynotes are, and we can just map them out like a really visual map of a recap of the whole day or 2 days. We also make animations, as you saw before in the clip, and crazy presentations. It goes on. And workshops like this where we try to teach everybody about visual thinking.
Right. You all got 20 sticks of spaghetti, 1 meter of tape, 1 meter of string, and 1 marshmallow or something like this. And you've got 12 minutes of time. And the goal is to build the tallest standing structure. So you build a tower. And there are some little rules. You can't not hang it from the ceiling. They do it, really. And you should leave the table as it is right now. And the marshmallow should be on top in its entirety, so you can't break it or use it as glue. Everything else is allowed, so you can break spaghetti, you can cut the cord, anything is possible. And afterwards we share some insights about this challenge. I will keep the time. First, getting to know each other, take 2 minutes, and then I'll start the time for this challenge.
Presentation we just heard, we heard a couple of terms that I want to emphasize. First of all, we heard heard it mentioned that it's all about an iterative process, and it's also really about prototyping, just stepping into an iterative process, creating instantly, and iterating and improving it and optimizing as you go. And drawing is a good way of doing that for more abstract concepts. And in order to do that, you, of course, especially in team context, you really need to create a common language. And that is something that we aim to offer you today, to introduce you into. And of course, if you want to know the language, you have to have a vocabulary. And the first part is focused on that. So basically what we're going to do... Is it wrong? Yeah, it's let's start by warming up. So get your markers ready, put them to the paper, and just start drawing. We're going to do some circles to really loosen up the wrists. If you hold your pen, it usually helps, especially if you want to do an ellipse and want it to look nice, is to hold it like this, perpendicular to the surface, and instead of like as you would when writing. So try to act like you were like a printer head. Just hold it like that. And draw like that.
So you can use your
different directions of the ellipses. Try to vary.
Yeah. You can use your whole arm from your shoulder to really try to make it round. And if you really try to make it big, yeah, not big before.
I know it's hard, but try to keep your arm loose from the table.
You can go over a couple of times. The first time, don't let loose of your paper with your pen. Just go over a couple of times, just until you think it's right enough.
So it sounds like a very simple exercise, and of course it is. But you can already learn a bit from it. Like when you make an ellipse, you can see the examples on Beamer or how Pete is making them. You don't have to make one perfect circle and start at the same point and end at exactly the same point. If I ask you what these shapes are, you will still say circles and ellipses, even though there are many overlapping. So it's not about a pretty drawing, but a useful drawing. And actually, that ellipse shape or that circle shape, that's a very natural shape that's already in your arm. If you use your shoulder and your elbow, both, so don't lock your arm or your hand to the table like Wim said. But if you can move them freely, you get used to the pen that you're using. It's interesting to change the angle of the pen to see what types of lines you can make with it. And it's just a good way to warm up. This is what we do too. Also, especially if you have a small piece of paper, it's good to see that overlapping drawings doesn't create a worse drawing. You can read overlapping drawings quite easily. So don't be scared to use overlap in your drawings. Actually, it tends to look more interesting if you overlap drawings.
Alright, now some straight lines. Try to also vary the angle. Try to draw parallel lines. Try to draw the exact same line a couple of times. And try to make it as long as possible. Try to challenge yourself. There's a nice trick. Robert will show you for drawing a really straight line.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that.
You can use the edge of your paper to, of course, make a very straight line by using your finger as a guide.
Use your finger as a guide for the table's edge.
Don't touch your finger, but...
What you see on the screen here is when you make one dot somewhere in the center of your paper, you can try and see if you can aim your line. So if you make one dot, try to make all lines, like a wheel, all go through the same point. And if you got that down, the first one will be pretty horrible. Or actually the first two are quite okay, because then you get the point where they cross. And then try and see if you can get the other lines through the same point. And after a while, you'll see that you will improve. Just like with the ellipses, if you do a couple of them, try to make them really big. So really from one end of your paper to the other. So,
like target practice.
Okay, so now that you've warmed up, you've made ellipses, so curved lines, you made straight lines, and that's the building blocks of your drawing. If you're making more complex shapes, which we will be doing soon, try to make lines that are parallel, one after the other. So don't mix up the directions too much. You'll see that if you make one line and you want to make another one parallel, that's quite easy. But if you make one line go one direction, then do something totally different, and then try to make the second one or the third one actually parallel, it's more difficult. So try to keep using the same direction as much as you can. Don't use an eraser, and try not to do this. Maybe some of you have done it. I haven't seen it yet. Those sketchy lines. It's very easy to. I should mute it. It's very easy to make lines, to build them up out of little pieces, but it's very distracting to do it. Also, if you want to draw a cat, it's very useful, but you're not drawing cats at all. So really try to make lines flow a bit, and if they're wrong, just try to correct them. Just like the ellipse, it's okay to move over the same line a couple of times. So just adjust your drawing and don't try to make it really perfect, really neat. Okay. That's why you shouldn't use an eraser also, because then you'll be trying to correct mistakes, and instead let those mistakes be and just make a new drawing, a better one.
Alright, so basic shapes. Let's give a try at some triangles. Try to vary them in angle, try to differ them in size. And also do some squares.
You can do them all on the same paper. It's okay to make them overlap a bit.
Try to now draw one that just fits on the paper, like as big as you can on the paper that you're using.
Okay. So now you have, with these combined shapes, of course you can combine curved and straight lines into kind of random shapes, and you can easily see how they become more recognizable shapes. So you can really start building real drawings out of these basic lines, and now you know everyone can do that. And a very simple one is this, the arrow. It's just a straight line and a triangle combined, but you can see that you can already make them in many different ways. And actually, they can start telling stories just by themselves already. So you can already do visual communication with just these lines and triangles. I guess you recognize these, like the recycling. Or even this would be a story that a lot of information gets combined into one outcome. So they can be metaphors unto themselves. And if you draw them wider, next slide, like this, you can put information onto them. Arrows, of course, show a direction and usually a time flow in your drawing. And if you can add more information onto that line, you can already start telling a linear story. And a simple way to construct it is like this. So it's basically about imagining a center line where the point of the arrow ends up. And see if you can just quickly construct it. You usually get a much nicer looking arrow than when you just start with one line and end exactly the same point.
And in the visual language, these, well, symbols that things that you draw, the elements of your drawing are the words. These would like string the information together and help you to make visual sentences. So arrows are really an important part of using visual thinking. You have some other examples? Try to draw a couple real quick.
See if you can make this one. If I add the text collecting input here, for example, you can imagine how this can become like a story by itself.
Everybody draw a couple?
Okay, now if you know how to draw an arrow and give it a width, you can put stuff on top of it, usually text. But if you put it into perspective like this, and then I recommend you try it. We're not going to teach you a lot about perspective because that's not what visual thinking is about. But you can see, if you draw an arrow, you can really literally place items on top. If you divide your arrow up into pieces, you can name them as steps, and you can let, for example, a person, there we do a very simple figure, you can let them walk through a story. So you can really show this drawing to people and walk them through the story as well. You can identify with a person walking through a landscape, following this arrow, this timeline. So it's a very simple way to building a very simple linear story. If you have any questions in between, feel free to ask. I'm guessing this is too easy for you guys.
How are we supposed to hold the pen again?
Sorry?
Like perpendicular.
And then when we draw a line, you said we can use the pen.
Well, what you can do is use your hand on the paper as a guide, but be careful not to lock your hand or your wrist or your elbow to the table. If you do that, for example, your elbow, then every line you'll make will be curved. If you lock your wrist to the table, then you can only make very short lines. So you can use your hand as a guide, but still make sure that you can move your shoulder, your elbow, and your wrist all together. Okay.
Yeah, so using all these elements we can basically construct any kind of shape and any kind of object in the real world. Here are some examples, and try to kind of reverse engineer the kind of shapes that they're made up of. For example, this sign here is constructed by using two rectangles and a triangle. Here's another triangle, circle, circle. yeah, give a couple of these a try. Try to draw the car maybe. Or here we have a balloon. Maybe you could also draw it as a light bulb, which would closely resemble it.
With very easy tricks, you can give it a little bit of depth. For instance, the signpost. If you add a little bit of shading underneath your arrow, it pops out and it becomes much more of a signpost.
Also, don't be scared to show a bit of the construction lines. For example, if you build the signpost, it's a triangle, there's a vertical post. Don't be afraid to let those lines overlap. Or for example, this line, maybe you don't need it to make a signpost. But still, if I write anything in here, you can still read it. And now you don't get the problem that if you make the post, try to make it perfect, that you do something like this. Actually, they don't really connect. So don't be afraid to let those lines overlap, or let these lines, for example, here, extend a little bit. If you try to make it really perfect and really straight, you usually get these bit wobbly lines. You get your tongue out of your mouth and you try to be really precise, and that's not worth the effort. You can draw really quickly by not caring too much about those. Yeah.
Another thing that also helps in that case. So if you feel like those lines kind of mess up your drawing, which they don't, of course, but you can just do the other lines a couple of times extra. Just
Make an extra dark.
make them extra dark or twice as thick, and that way they become more true than the other lines.
Okay, now you still have quite some time to, well, basically copy the drawings we have on the board, and you can see how they build up out of very simple shapes. But still, you're thinking too much about your drawing. So we're gonna shake you up. We're gonna do drawings a bit like these. We're gonna do a lot on one piece of paper, so don't make them really big, but about this size, I guess. We'll be saying a name. It's like Pictionary. We'll be giving you a name or a word, an object, anything, and you're going to draw it in about, let's say, 3 or maybe 5 seconds. All right, start with 5 seconds.
Kind of maybe a kind of developmental linear progression from how you could build up a drawing that represents a person. There are really a lot of different ways to go about, and from our experience we found that one that is by far the easiest is to draw the W guy, as we call it. And it's basically just an upside down U, another U inside it, and a circle above it for the head. And if you can draw these, yeah, you can basically tell any story involving people. It's important to kind of, it's not, you can of course vary a lot with the different proportions. Like you can emphasize different features of a person by using different proportions. But the basic idea is that you should you apply a rule of thirds. So reserve about a third from the shoulders to the upside of the head, 1/3 for the torso, and 1/3 from the feet to the crotch. And if you kind of stay within a certain range of that, it always looks like a person. If you would draw this, maybe this doesn't work as well. And there's also it also helps. This way of drawing also helps because it's also easy to draw a big crowd of people. You just do this, and you just give them heads. And then you have a crowd of people. Maybe give them a kind of platform that binds them together. Now they're a group, and that way you can really easily draw a mass of people. And of course, once you've drawn this, you can really easily add things to it. For example, maybe an arm. This one has like a body like a sea star, maybe. You can draw a little face on it. One thing that always helps is to give the person a nose, because then you immediately know in which direction they are looking. And yeah, once they have the nose and the eyes, you really start to have some expression there. And of course, from this you can really make it a lot more, really add a lot of meaning to it. Maybe this person has a big hat, a bow tie, and a bag of money. Maybe this is an entrepreneur.
It's the CEO of Spaghetti Inc.
The CEO of Spaghetti Inc. Yeah. A lot of spaghetti here. And yeah, maybe let's do it.
Don't think too much, just try. Don't sit in front of your paper, just staring into the darkness.
Yeah, that's probably the best advice you're going to get when learning to draw. It's don't look up, don't look in front of you. Just look down to the paper and just draw it. Because if you start looking away from the paper, you're not really thinking about the drawing. You're just zoning out. If it's really a hard one, like maybe a public administrator or something, you can always just write it down underneath it if you really don't know it. But
Text is allowed.
yeah, text is allowed. Yeah. Of course, this is not the only way to draw it. Here's this one is really based upon a star, so it's you just draw the limbs, and then roughly some shape for the head. There you have a person. You can start out with a square, and just go from there. But when you really want to maintain speed, for example, when you're you're doing, for example, field work, research work, and you really want to take some quick notes, drawing those kinds of characters really works out really well, because they're just the fastest way to do it.
Often when you just want to say, here's a group of 10 people, and they have to work together in a team with 5 other people, then you don't have to detail those people, or show realistic faces, or hands, or any details. And then the W figure is just a very easy way to go. So now you know that you can draw it, a very simple basic figure. You can add some detail to the figure itself or to its context. You're never stopped to start a drawing anymore about people. And every design you make, every paper you write, every story you communicate visually will be about people. So it's very important to be able to draw them. And then to choose what you need. You only need to say, here's a group of 10 people. Just make a lot of U's in the heads. If you need more, then you have to start detailing it more.
Let's talk a little bit about what the next level is. Now you have a little bit of vocabulary. You know how to draw people. You know how to draw some basic shapes. You know the words, and you can maybe even start stringing sentences together using arrows and using shapes to really connect the elements together. Yeah, and if you can start to apply that, it just usually looks pretty messy, but it's all about it being useful for you. So you get with some really quick sketches. These are examples that we did. I think which session was that? I think you did it, right?
I'm not even sure what they're from, but you can already start imagining what the story here is. You can see that there's different layers. They have numbers. You see there are some words added. You can see like a structure drawing in the middle. So you can see how this could, for example, be a story about how a company is structured. And it's really visual, but of course in combination with text, you can make better visual notes. On the next slide, you see another example. This is also making visual notes, but just make it start it by writing down keywords first. And then later add drawings to them. So you can see here how very simple drawings can be added to text, or you can start with drawings and add some keywords later. So visual notes don't have to be very pretty or very visual, very colorful. Don't be afraid to use words, text. And a simple way to start making visual notes, we would really like you to do it during the session as well. So at the end, you have your own personal notes of everything you've learned today. On the next slide, you see what the approach is. So when you listen to someone's story and you make those visual notes, you start just by listening to a story. So listening is a big part of note taking. Then drawing those parts or writing down the keywords, just all of them, just to get an overview. And then, for example, those arrows or lines or frames, they can give a structure to that information. So often you can just start by words, and the visual note-taking, the visual part, is really a layer you place on top of the information you already have to cross out what information you don't need or which keywords are combined together to form one idea. So yeah, in practice, they can work a bit like a mind map. If you make notes like you always do during a lecture, it's easy to start at the top left of your paper and then just make a bullet list. And if you want to approach it more in a visual way, it's nice to start differently. Maybe just with a different orientation of your paper. So don't make it vertical, portrait, but make your paper a landscape. Then you already will start to make your visual notes different. And you could even start in the middle, and then create your story around it. A bit like a mind map does. Probably you have experience with making mind maps. And if you start transforming those keywords that are here, mind maps also are not about writing big stories, but really the key aspects. If you start visualizing them, you can already use it as a tool to communicate better to someone else. So it can look like this. You start in the middle and you make your story go all around. And actually it's a bit like a linear story then. There's one big arrow you can see in the background. And the visual information on top of the keywords text you have is, for example, this part of the text which the speaker was talking about has two main conclusions that mean this, and actually that can be used for these scenarios. So the visual element is something you can really add as a layer. Of course, when you make visual notes, you add those drawings, and some very simple ones, I'm not going to explain them all, but some very simple ones are, for example, just boxes for text. If you have one big title, usually the speaker of any keynote or of any presentation will start with the most important message of that presentation. So it's nice to be able to place that on your paper, in the center, or at the top, really big. And just try it, see if you can make like a little banner out of it, or a text balloon. And then start there, and then make the rest of your visual notes there. If you write text and you make a box around it, make sure you write the text first, and then make the box. It's very, very obvious, but you make that mistake once, and then you learn. And then, yeah, make this fun as well for yourself. Adding notes, to some of you, it's probably very natural to start sketching in the sidelines of your notepad. It can be fun for yourself, but especially if you communicate it to someone else. So that is, probably you can already see how you can really use this when you're writing paper, to combine information, to show a structure or a timeline. And what is very important, what text or titles get a banner, and what is not so important and you leave more in the corner, or you don't add any visuals to that.
It might be hard to really draw everything that you hear, but it's okay. Usually, when you need some time to think about what you should be drawing, it's okay to not immediately draw, but wait a little bit to see if it fits, if you could use it as a metaphor, and to wait for a kind of an entryway for you to actually draw it. And one of the things to do that is to put it into is to wait for the appropriate structure. So wait to identify what the relationships are. If it's for example sequential, or are there different relationships? And these kind of relationships require different strategies. Here are two examples of different kind of relationships. Here's a sequential relationships, where you have like a process that you want to explain. And here's, for example, a relation, more direct relations, where it's not as linear. And those kind of relationships require also different approaches. If you want to explain a process, it usually really helps to do it sideways, because immediately you can identify the way to read it from left to right, or maybe the other way if you put an arrow in the other direction. But so for a linear story, it's really easy to choose a sideways perspective. On the other hand, if you want to show a more complex system of relationships or a hierarchy, a top view is usually better because yeah, it's more easily to read. For example, if you would draw a picture of your living room at home and you would do it from the side, it would be really hard to tell which object would be where in the room. But if you do that from the top, it works quite well. Here you see also a sequential story. The Egyptians basically started that part, I think. And it's just a really good way of explaining a process. The good, actually the truth is basically in the middle. And that's the way that we approach it, which is by combining those two views in one drawing. And a good way to do that is a treasure map. Which is basically, it shows the different relationships between the elements. So you just put them out on a sheet and you draw them from a sideways perspective. And that way you get the best of both worlds. You can really clearly see what the relationships are to the different elements on the page, which doesn't have to be linear. And you can also have a clear view of the different elements of the story. In this case, it's actually a linear progression. And it's really, as you see, it's very clear in which direction your eye should travel. And that's what you always want to be going for. Here are a couple of examples of drawing that we made that apply those principles. This one was, I think, what was this one for? This one was about future scenarios for mobility solutions that people would use in the future. This one is about a coaching consultancy that trains coaches and basically describes their training process. And this actually brings us back to the arrows that we discussed earlier. You can really use those to guide people's eyes through your drawing. Here's another example of that. You can really clearly see the progression. And here's another example of that we did for the Dutch Rowing Federation. And this actually looks like a pretty complicated drawing, but in essence it's really simple. You start with A, you go to B, and you have a trajectory that you have to cross to get to the other side. And when drawing this kind of drawing, you'd... wait, we don't have this slide. Well, basically, this is the level that you want to be starting at. So you want to define, for example, an entry state, the state that you're starting in, the end result, and then you can connect those two through the process. Connecting different elements together is also a really important part of it. In this case, the story was about the Dutch Rowing Federation, which was a closed-off organization. You can see the castle here with big walls around it. You really use that as a metaphor. And they wanted to go to an open organization with multiple entry points in which you would could pick out the aspect of the rowing sport that appeals most to you. But of course those elements are still part of the same whole, so they need something to connect them. In this case we took the map of the Netherlands to connect those. But on a sketch level, you could just as easily use the circle or another shape. Here are a couple of examples that you can use. One of them is a circle or an ellipse, which is basically a circle in perspective, and a trapezoid, which is just a sheet of paper in perspective. And you can really use those to structure your story. For example, by creating different levels of abstraction, different hierarchies. And also by dividing up in sections to describe different aspects of the same whole. And of course, if you give them a little bit of volume, turn them into a block, you could write some text on it and give it additional meaning. Here's an example of, that I think Robert made. Which really shows the different ways you could use that. Here you can see the different levels. Here are different areas that are related to those different subjects, but they're not. They're on a different hierarchy. So, can you tell something more about?
Yeah, of course it looks very difficult when you just take one look at it. And that's where the color comes in. Because the color shows basically 4 parties that join together during several meetings. And those are the puzzle pieces that are stacked together. And during those meetings, so it's different parties. One of them is the municipality, that was the party that started this, this drawing basically, that wanted people in a municipality to organize their own events better, so that they could have a hands-off approach. Some of these parties are citizens, organizations like sports clubs, businesses, and the municipality itself. And if I tell it like that, and you see the picture together with it, you can remember it better. I can still recall this story, even though I made this last year, because it looks complicated, and you can find a lot of information in it, but the structure is really quite simple. If you make a sketch of it, I think that's the next slide. Oh no. But yeah, this structure, if you go through it like a little story, and that's how the drawing was made, it becomes what we call a coat hanger for your story. And the story would be your coat that you hang up on this coat hanger, on this visual, and you can easily explain the story again to anyone else.
And you can, of course, if there's different people who have to tell their own version of the story, they can just walk through the drawing in a different direction, for example. It doesn't have to be, this kind of drawing doesn't impose a specific way of reading it, because of, which really works well for more complex stories. And talking about complex stories, here's the exercise. We're going to draw democracy. So you have 10 minutes to do it, to make a drawing of what democracy is. Almost everybody drew a group of people. And you also made decisions, be it consciously or unconsciously, about how you want to frame that story and what the exact story is that you want to tell. And I want to elaborate on that a little bit by first examining the what kind of content you want to be communicating, and then give you some tools to pick the right approach to really frame your story in a way that you conveys the meaning and make perhaps your opinion about the subject. So here are some examples of. I'll just start with this right away. So there's as we saw before, we have different kind of information that we want to convey. It could be a sequence of events showing, for example, a timeline. It could be a comparison. You want to compare, for example, democracy versus a communist system. Then you would have to show the both of them. And a systems approach, basically, and I think that's what you chose. Most of you chose just now, which is showing the different relationships between all the different elements. For example, the rule of law on one side, and then the Hertie Politica on the other. And the next step that you took, I think almost everybody did it, is to approach it on either this level or this level. You could take it. You could really take a really logical approach and appeal to the systems thinking that people have. Communicating a sequence of events is easily done, for example, with a flow chart, like you see over here. If you want to compare different subjects in a logical way, you would use, for example, bar charts or a pie chart. And if you want to convey a system, you could. There are a lot of different ways to do that, but how to say that? A good example of that is a hierarchy diagram, where you have like all those branches coming out of each other. You know. If you want to appeal to emotion, you kind of have to start thinking about who you are communicating to. There's a couple of metaphors that basically in that case you have to use metaphors, and picking the right metaphor is really important. There are a lot of metaphors that are really easy and accessible to understand. For example, you can show a sequence or a timeline as maybe a road to the top of a mountain. If you want to do that for comparison, we might compare a dog and a cat, or a bicycle to a tree, for any case. And in the case of a system, we would have to think of other systems that we already know. Maybe it's a solar system, maybe it's a railway system, maybe it's... Any ideas for systems that we have? Maybe a life cycle of a certain animal. There's a lot of different examples that you can come up with. And they should arise from your audience. You should think about what your audience, what their world of experience is, and take an element from that and use that as, what you say, a coat hanger for your story. Another approach that you might want to choose is just really for practical purposes. You don't necessarily want people to learn something, but you really want them to do something. And in that case, an example of communicating sequence in a way that is practical would be maybe a manual maybe an IKEA manual. It shows you a sequence of different pictures showing the different states of the thing that you're assembling, and by showing that in a certain sequence, it conveys how you should assemble it. Comparing that could be a before and after picture. And an example of communicating in a system is, for example, a map that would show you how to get from one place to another. So,
Ask one question.
Yeah? Yeah?
Ask one question. Quick question about that. Have you found that trying to mix the three approaches at the same time in one drawing is too much? So say that you wanted to communicate to some people how decisions could be taken collectively, right?
Yeah.
And you want to do it like very logically, but you also want to make it like emotional, and you want it to be practical. Is that too ambitious? I mean, is it better to focus on a certain approach, or can you mix?
It becomes more challenging for drawing it, of course. That's the thing. If you would really pick one of those purposes, or make separate drawings to highlight different aspects next to each other, you could approach it from that point, which would take less effort. But if you want, really connecting those, creating a drawing that appeals to your audience on all those levels at the same time, and offers all that structure and logic to the information. I mean, that's also, there's no preconceived way to go about it. That's our business, basically. Yeah, that's what we try to figure out. In any case, how much information you can stuff into a drawing. Of course,
what you really should do is prioritize.
Yeah.
So what's the most important thing? If you think your metaphor is say star, and you want to also explain the steps you should take, it's a matter of hierarchy in your image. We use the 300 rule of thumb. In the first 3 seconds, you see the most important part of your illustration. Then people decide to go on or to skip it. In the next 30 seconds, you can give some more information. Then it's maybe on this level, and in the other minutes, you can give some detail and some text that they might read if they're really interested into the. So that you guide them into the picture. And sometimes it's a metaphor and it's more on the emotional level, and sometimes it's more on the logical level. So in front of you, highly educated people, it might be enough to introduce the rationale of a story. But maybe for other people or audiences outside this room, you should start with a emotional picture that explains to them the relevance of the whole thing and what it should do to them after they read or
exactly. You have to think about
prototype and test, say, different prototype drawings and test them and see what people.
That's where it starts.
You have to think about what is your goal. So if your goal is to really explain something clearly, you go for a logical route and make people understand something. But if your goal is to change their behavior or make them do some action, you really go to the emotional route. So it's really think of what you want to achieve with your audience.
Okay. So it's really about if you want people to know something, you want them to be informed, then you really pick that. But if you wanted to care, you would take you would have to take a different approach. Just a bar chart doesn't carry any weight if it doesn't show you what its implications are, for example.
The fun thing is that during the democracy exercise, you already did this. I saw some very practical ballot boxes where you put your vote into the box. That's a very tangible, practical thing. I saw some emotional things like showing that people are happy with an outcome that is chosen, a democratic decision. So you automatically already do this. You choose what you think you need in your drawing. And by showing it in this way, it's a very straightforward schematic. You are aware of it, so you can make a better decision next time you make a drawing, what levels you need.
There's a question here.
Yes, I have a question, not knowing whether I'm getting ahead of the course,
Yeah.
but I'm really wondering how you balance the need for your project or your message to be very serious and have this visual thinking approach towards something and maybe draw something. Because the most common narrative is to have something in a PDF document. And this is kind of what people also expect. And if you are outside of the box, I feel that you are in a somewhat different context, and I would say your research might not seem as professional or profound in a way, or, well, at least I feel you need to still make the case that it is.
Yeah.
And what I'm asking is, how do you ensure that you still are perceived with the same level of profoundness and professional?
Yeah, it's a very relevant question because we don't work a lot with researchers, but more in the business context. But there you have the same dynamics. People want to be taken seriously, and they are afraid their ideas might not be worked out well enough. But from our experiences, is the more simply you can explain things, and the more confident people are with the topics they want to explain and to get, well, maybe you have to convince your manager or something. The better it works, and what we see is that people burying their ideas in text and documents are often also covering, how do you say, the holes in the story. So it's also a way of mystifying and put up a lot of clouds and be fake. And what we do, and that's for some people not that comfortable, but we take the essence and we make it clearly. And we work with a lot of management teams from big corporations, and I think for them it's also kind of liberating that they can explain their fairly complex stories in a very simple way.
I see.
Yeah, well, it's a matter of confidence, I think.
So just the context that I'm in, writing my master thesis right now, and I'm probably not going to draw my master thesis to my advisor, but I'm still going to write it. But the application of it could be that I just, once I'm able to draw the essence of my thesis, I'm better able to write it.
Yeah, and people will better understand it. It will even show that you're really mastered the topic. Like physics professors, they're always looking for the most simple formula. In the simplicity, there's the beauty in the simplicity, and that's not a sign of that you don't understand it. It's the sign that you mastered the topic.
And I also think that one thing does not exclude the other. So, I mean, you need to hand in a PDF at the end of your master, of course. But at the same time, if you want some other people to read your research, maybe you can, use different ways of showing it.
If you want to update your family on what you're doing, what you're writing, even if only you use the drawing there, in a very different setting, it could be very useful. And there no one cares about the quality or the sketchiness of it. So it really depends on the situation where you use it. And often you can add a lot of value with a drawing to building your story, just as a personal thing. So you could first draw out the story, and then you have a better idea of how to write it or structure it in the PDF. So it's not always just for communication, but really to help yourself think about a problem, how to get to the essence of it, like that.
Any presentation? Okay.
A little, I think it connects a lot with this discussion.
Yeah, there's no.
Perfect.
I'll try to be quick. For those who don't know me, my name is Kai, one of the three that are helping to put this together. And Bruno explained to you a little bit of the background of our research, so the question and the communities. What I'm about to show you is an exercise we did using this kind of skills, but without the help of them, but with the help of an amazing illustrator, Barbara. We tried to tell our story in terms of methodology, right? And here I'll just go through, because this is a poster, and it's supposed to have more information. But okay, it's a journey, and it's not a recipe. It's not something that we're like saying that people should do like, but it's just the way we found that we could tell our story a little bit simplified, right? So basically, our project, in terms of the methodology, it started not only with a vague idea of a topic, like about sustainability, but also with this idea of broadening the audience, right, related to Onda Politica. And also with the idea that we could not do that only writing a PDF. So right from the beginning, we had to start thinking about which kind of means and what kind of process we would have. So this idea was slowly being prepared in order to become this project, right? So we asked a lot of friends about how to do this, you know, some filmmakers, some guys in technology, and how we could do, and we explored a lot of tools you can imagine, and also like trying to figure out how we could do that. So we put together like a prototype. We visited 2 communities here in Germany so that we could test the limits of doing a multimedia approach to that research that Bruno was talking about. So how to take video and how would people react in the interviews, for example, and what kind of data we would have. So we had to plan a trip, and last summer we went to Brazil to do the most part of the field work. This was very important, but there was a lot of work involved here, especially with preparing the equipment and all the logistics of this. And here we arrived in these places, so visiting those 2 kinds of communities. What we basically had to do is to run a qualitative research, but adding a lot of complexity in it, right? So we had not only the regular topic that we were engaging with because of the constructivist approach. So we did not know exactly what the final question would be, but also we had like all this recorders, we had a lot of cameras taking pictures, taking video, and we had to learn a lot about this. But what we did were like 2 major approaches. One was in-depth interviews, and we had like over 40 hours of this, which we are now trying to unpack, transcribe and everything. And we had also this, what we're calling the situated interviews, which were like interviews with people explaining how these communities were. So pretty much we had a camera on, we had the recorder on. We were trying to understand not only with the text, but also with the landscape and what they were trying to show us. We had also about 10 hours of this. And we talked about with the eco-villagers, with the people from the assentamentos, and also with some bureaucrats. So this is like a very shortly what we did in terms of the methodology. And we had also these short clips that really helped us to gather a lot of data. So we have this multimedia data, and what we had to do is like to put them into boxes, like separating by types and separating by content as well. And in this phase is very important, like to take into consideration also the references, because this is a master thesis, like the academic references, and all this work involves preparing this to use a software afterwards. And this approach that we're using is basically relying on the software atlas, but also with a lot of complementary tools. And what we do with all this data that are in boxes is like to open them up again, to analyze it, code it, and to break it into small pieces. So what we're trying to do is like to create a lot of smaller content that we're going to be able to build something different in the analysis. So establish relationships and try to see these tools and these challenges right here. So I'm saying all of this because this is like a very tough topic to explain, and we kind of used this approach in order to put together in a poster, which was a very challenging experience, and we believe that it was worth doing because we learned a lot also about our own process doing this. And where we wanted to get in is about this map, right? Because this is central for our research. And this map is relying on the basic idea that when you do the research, all the leftovers that Lucas, the guy from the beginning, had, they're valuable in order to put together and to visualize this map. And when you write a PDF, it's only one narrative possible through this map, right? And what we're trying to do is to make available the whole map. And this whole map will have multiple narratives, because the content is coded into small pieces so that people could access and build their own narrative. And so that we can engage more, and so this idea of the broader audience kind of not only ends here, but like it opens up a lot of opportunities in terms of our project. So like this is our short storytelling, and this is the poster. And that's just an example of things that you could do using your thesis, for example. So this is like a preview, first version, but we believe that you know, share with you guys could be interesting, so that you know what kind of stuff you could use with this amazing workshop you're doing here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Extra canvas. Yeah.
Yes.
The story, so you can have a look at what our visual notes could look like. And I was thinking of your map metaphor, and you draw it here at the end of the story. And actually, that really tells the why you're doing everything, to be able to show the different routes through the map. So if I would, now I have heard the presentation, if I would make the same presentation again, maybe I would blow up the map part. And then that is really the reason. So from a distance, if this is your piece of paper, you could really see directly what the end result is while you're doing everything, to show the different routes on the map, instead of having just one visible. And then this really is the metaphor for the whole story. So by playing with the size of the drawings, and by well, this is just my first iteration on the drawing. You can really get the visual story to fit your story in text, or your spoken story better, to mix it together. But thanks for sharing.
I think we're going to do the version 2.0.
It's nice to see, right, how your visual inspired me to
Thanks a lot.
I'd like to introduce to you is what we call a shared mental model. It's a little academic, it suits you, I think. And what it does, it takes your scalp now. The whole thing, what we're doing here, is making your thoughts external. So you put it on the paper, and as soon as you see it on the paper, you see what's lacking, or what should be added. So your senses are taking it inside again, and then you're going to iterate. So the whole design thinking process is starting off. So you have a mental model. That's your mental model. You think of democracy in a certain way. You see the problems, or you think of democracy as the process, or you see debate. But when it gets interesting is when you have to explain that to another person. And there's where it becomes a shared mental model. Because if you say, well, I would like to discuss the issues with democracy, then you can introduce it with a drawing or structure, and then it becomes her mental model, her in this case, as well, and she can add to that. So then a dialogue starts to come. And obviously, well, you can think of this of two persons communicating, getting there, well, maybe here's mental model on the paper, and it becomes hers. But it can easily be a group communicating to another group, like a management team communicating towards employees, or a researcher towards an administrative bureaucrat. And obviously you can imagine that it's a feedback loop. So you get some continuously flowing ideas and feedback on what's happening in here. So you can see it as communication, but maybe it's more like co-creation. And that's actually what we do a lot in our work. We design not only communication, so we don't make the beautiful drawings, but we design a tool for conversation. And that's what I want to go into right now. And we call that canvassing. And I will show you some examples of what canvassing is. Canvassing, in this picture you've seen before, is just putting an underlying structure into, well, in a meeting. So it could be an agenda, it could be an underlying structure for your presentation. And you can either tell your story with the structure or use it as a model to create and to be complete. So you say, well, I have to discuss these 9 things, these are relationships between them, but you don't fill them in yet. You do this in your group. It can be done in the ways Willem explained. And the other way to do that with canvases, I will go into canvases right after this, is to use a metaphor. And a metaphor can be a simple drawing like the light bulb as a metaphor for an idea. But it can be a little bit more complex, like if you would like to explain this safe, sustainable transport, you can translate it into something safe with a lock, a lead for sustainability, and something for transport. That's to describe the idea, but you can also use it to generate ideas. So you take a big concept like an airport or a VOC ship, and you just you say to yourself, well, let's imagine this company like a VOC ship. What do we see? We see the weather condition. It could be the market condition. We see the stars. That's maybe the trends or something that maybe our values. We're going to navigate on that. So in that way, your story develops based on a metaphor you've chosen. And based on, you don't define the elements up front, but you let the metaphor give you the story. And maybe you can add some sharks or some competing ships, or say, well, this might be a little bit old-fashioned to have a VOC ship. Maybe we should build a modern version of our company and make the comparison between the two and apply towards it. Canvassing is more or less making a model, a flowchart, or a process, and adds a little extra dimension with a metaphor, like the gap here, or the rising sun of this bright future. So it's more or less, it's a flowchart with a little bit of an emotion. You can use the iceberg. These are models you've seen before, I think, or the routing. And what it does, if you put this down in a meeting, everybody knows you have to discuss 4 quarters of the model. And it works on a different level than if you just have a bullet list with these 4 points to discuss. Everybody sees the progression if you fill this during your meeting. And afterwards you have your minutes in a visual way and just make a photograph and send it to people. We do this all the time and we get paid for it. It's really, one that you might know is the business model canvas. It's really used a lot these days. But it's really a simple structure. Just 9 building blocks, bam, and everybody uses it around the world. And there are a lot of derivatives of this model, or it changed a little, for example on the left, about designing an event, and it's roughly, the scheme is you have an entering behavior of people visiting this workshop, for example, or a bigger event, and an exiting behavior, and everything in between you add that. So you tell them stories, you give them an experience, and maybe they enter with a lot of stress and they leave with a smile on their face. and what have you done to do this? And obviously it can be more visual, that's what we do. This is a live illustration of a Bismodel canvas. And here we've took some more time to make it more pretty, but the prettiness is not, yeah. Maybe this relates a little to the discussion we had just had about how can you use it in serious context. This might fit the nature of a small meeting with people you know and you're familiar with. This is used to communicate throughout the whole company. This is a very large company in the Netherlands, a few thousand employees, and it needs to have a higher level. It should look more professional, and then it's useful to put more effort into it. Here we have the drawing again. This is more of a combination. Relates to the question somebody else asked. There you are. You see the scheme. That's maybe the canvas. Let's go from A to B, and then you add a metaphor. So you add the castle, you add the pillars that have to be standing. And really, this drawing is enough if you only have to use it in a meeting. And you only have to go to this level if you have to communicate to a lot of people. There are two schemes I would like to introduce you to show the different perspectives you can have on the same concept. In the upper example, it's a story from A to B. So please draw along. What you basically see some simple W figures. Okay, make it a real W. You see an arrow. We go from this point to that point. This horizon, and we have the sun. This could be a story about a team moving forward. So this is a new strategy, and maybe there is phase A, B, and C, or this might be some milestones in between. This is the final milestone. And there might be some obstacles to overcome, or some difficulties that you have to address. And maybe we have some key success factors. Maybe it's about the equipment you choose to take on the journey. And well, this might be a perfect agenda for a meeting of your management while discussing how to move forward. What are we going to do in this phase? Do we already know what to do in this phase, or maybe we don't define it that well? We only decide what that should be in the end of phase A, well, etc. But this is only one approach to change. So this is a very logical approach. Step 1, step 2, step 3. The other one is what we call the change lever. It's on other level. It might be on the same strategy, but this is a more mechanical description. If you move this part down, then this part will go up. So if you want to go from state A to state B, you have to move the lever. But the position of the turning point determines the resistance of the system. If you have it like here, there's a big momentum. If you have it here, you have to push really hard. So this one could be, the position of this lever could be the resistance of the organization towards the projected change of the strategy you would like to implement. And then you can think of all the tactics you have in your organization or in your community to convince people of doing something, or, and that's the other, so you have solution 1 is to do a lot of tactics, talk with people, organize all kind of meetings, or to lower the resistance. Maybe they are in the same solution space, but it's a whole different perspective on the same story, where this part is really explained in this. This is the logic of the change. This is more about the emotion of people resisting change. So this is on another level. So would you add? Yeah, well, this is about our workshop really. We're going to do a final exercise. That's about how you think and how you use it in your own work. And then we try to design a canvas yourself or build a metaphor. But so far, our theory and practice, are there any questions? No?
No.
Then go on. Can you introduce?
I was wondering if you had any criticisms of using those kind of. Why would you not draw? I'm really curious about that. Because I do have some experience, for example, when we talked about demystifying information, for example, by making them visible and concrete. But I think you can also, you probably already can see that you can also mystify a lack of coherence, for example, between different elements of a story by kind of distracting people with a metaphor that suggests that it's a working whole, but it is not. So that's definitely something, yeah, it could be used as a criticism for applying this kind of storytelling. Because, of course, it's a powerful medium, but it can use for either good or bad. And in that sense, it's really up to you what you do with it. So yeah, and in that case, you would really have to pick the right metaphor and make sure that your story actually really works.
Yes.
But
question?
Yeah?
Do you ever fear that you're oversimplifying things? Because while trying to get the essence of things, like in democracy, everybody tries to pick out one big idea and represent it, but actually there are many little things that matter a lot in the end, or maybe they're not so important.
Yeah, definitely. But we see simplification as a necessity for action. You would need to give some priority to the part of the information that is needed to lead to the action. If you want to, get enough leverage to create a certain action, you would really have to think about how you put the elements together. And some things are just more important in certain stories. Of course, simplification doesn't give it a complete image, but that's also inherent in a drawing. Of course, the drawing is not reality; it's a simulacra in a sense. And by actually using certain metaphors, you can also really emphasize that. For example, some clients of ours really ask us explicitly to make it look sketchy. Not sketchy in that sense, but in the metaphorical sense, but in the literal sense. Really have it appear as a sketch, like it's on the drawing table, and in that sense it also invites people to really think with you about what's missing in the drawing. And that's where that shared mental model process comes into play. And I think that's also the most powerful application of it. The fact that you're mapping out this territory together and making sense of it.
Maybe it connects to the prison metaphor you introduced in the beginning. I can see that researchers or people that are more from universities are all into the details. They want to have as complete as possible, but it doesn't make it very practical for people in the field to really take action to it. So if you just take the essence for one person of your research and make a picture of it and you can really clearly explain it, it makes it far more actionable. And that's really what we do. So talking about bridging the chasm, the gap between those parties, I think.
Is there a question over there? Yeah.
Yes, I have one question regarding the interpretation of your drawing, especially if I think back to some of the more complicated ones. I mean, text is always open to interpretation. Yes, you can make some drawings where there is no different answers, but some of them were very complex, especially if you pass them around big companies.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that people interpret them the way you mean?
By having an interpreter with it.
Okay, so you can never just pass it around like a leaflet, so it's always...
Could be both, but it's it demands a different kind of drawing. If you would need something to say you're a director or a head of a big organization, and you have 10 people who are some kind of middle management, and they have to communicate through the other people in the organization. And it's much more efficient to maybe send those 10 people with a drawing that they could use their respective stories that they could use. You could give them the drawing, and they could tell the story to all those different people, and kind of tailor it to the audience. Then it's easier to do that, for example, than make a drawing that you would definitely be sure that all the people would understand in a direct mailing, for example.
But we also make animations for that to solve it with a voiceover, so people get the same narrative every time they view the illustration. But it's a relevant question.
Yeah, don't you sometimes have the threat that you focus more on the appearance? I know this, for example, from PowerPoint a lot more than on the content, for example. And then how do you cope with that?
Well, it's more the clients that focus more on the appearance than on the content. So it's more in the discussion with our clients that we have that tension. That they say, well, we should add this or more detail to that, and then it's our struggle to convince them that they should keep to the core of their message. And yeah, so.
And the form always has to emerge from the content, of course, and the content has to be right. Otherwise, I believe that it actually shows up in the drawing if it's not really consistent. If the content is not right, because it's actually pretty hard to make a bad story or bad data basically convincible, and that's I think also the challenge of drawing is that, and what drawing serves really well for, in fact, if you have the right content, is that it can really quickly inform you about why you should care about it, why you should even involve yourself with that piece of information that it conveys. It can communicate why it's plausible, why you should trust it, and it can give you some clarities. And if you match those three criteria, you have a good drawing. But the content is the underlying condition for that. If that's It's almost pretty much impossible to make a story that is definitely wrong to make it look right, because you have to make it more really explicit.
But not to completely dismiss all details in drawings. Details can be very functional if you want to express emotions, for instance. If you draw a very simple face, people can attach to it, but if you add details to it, the more details you add, the more people can relate, and the more you can change behavior.
Well, to add something to the discussion, we also get questions from organizations like Shell or the PR companies that work with them about communicating wrong stories. They are really good at coming up with mystifying figures, and so you have to come up with your own boundaries where you want to go, and where you say, well, we don't follow this path because we think this is not really truthful, or you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, you cannot tell a story without framing it in some way. And a lot of what we do is also about reframing incorrect frames. You know, the fact that a discussion, a political discussion, or something in society is framed in a certain way, and it creates miscommunication and misinformation also. And taking apart that frame, showing how another way to look at it is a really powerful way to do that. Sorry, yeah.
I was a little bit interested in how to tell, let's say, bad stories in good ways. Because we have talked so far about good stories, go to the sun, go to the goal, everything is perfect, everything is working, and how to make that story right. But I just want to know, in your experience, if you have faced some bad story, and how have you told, or how have you delivered the message?
I think you had an example. I think you were. We had, at one point, I think Nathan can complete the story, but we were in a table with a company that is involved in liquid gas, and a a week later, she came by at lunch, and we had lunch, and a really nice conversation. And she told that she was actually really surprised that Nathan at one point actually asked, "Yeah, are you sure this is right? Are you sure that you're not wrong about this?" And she was so surprised about the fact that we were doubting what she was saying that it really shook her, because she never met people who didn't believe in the fact that even doubting the whole paradigm of that liquid natural gas is a more sustainable solution than some other solutions, for example. And those questions are questions that you have to answer if you want to make a drawing, or at least for us it's that.
Yeah.
And
yeah, well, we can easily say this is a big Dutch oil company. Not to be specific, but what we do then, they wanted to say we come from coal, and then we at the whole gasoline system, and now we want to move to liquid natural gas. So that's progression. It's cleaner. It's better. But in my ears, that sounds really okay. It's a small step maybe, but they don't say anything about other resources for energy. So what we did is not just say, well, we come from coal and we move to oil, and now we go to LNG. But actually it became some kind of roundabouts, and we also show the other routes and draw something in the background and say, okay, so the story became we choose this route, but there are other routes, and then you have
nuance.
Yeah, maybe it's just that word. Yeah.
But of course, they didn't want a landscape full of solar panels and windmills. That's of course, yeah. You have to make decisions about what you draw, but there's always a push and pull dynamic there. You know, how far can you take them out of their comfort zone? And yeah, sometimes you don't completely agree with the fact that it's framed in a certain way, and you have to make a bet. Yeah, it's a devilish question.
But also your question about is there a bad story? We also come to clients and we listen to the story and we think this is not a convincing story. But then it's not our problem. If you come to us, you have to have a story that sounds at least okay, and we can elevate it. But if your story is inherently not really cool, then we cannot do magic and make it into an amazing story.
But we are hard as well for the process. So that
it's about communicating different situations, and when here is. Of course, sometimes it's challenging to communicate scenarios that may not be positive, even though the story may be super interesting. So, so I know it's kind of a tricky question. It's okay if you haven't faced that situation before, but I just want to know if, in your experience, you had and how you dealt with it.
No, it's more like the discussion that we have at lunch. Whether should we do this or not? Should we work for this company or shouldn't we? So we've got a call from American Tobacco. We didn't do it. But where you draw the line is really difficult.
In some cases, there's no right way to frame it. It doesn't match with what you want the world to be, and you just cannot do it. But yeah, sometimes you have to make the best of it, and you can really add something even to it. But there was another question, right? Yeah.
I have in the same flow of the conversation. If you look at that yellow poster we presented, the real version is full with text, right? It's really packed with text because we were worried about the interpretation question. So it's like, hey, someone is going to look at it by itself and we'll have no idea what that means. So we ended up using a lot of text, and when we looked at it again, we don't like it. I mean, we would love like a version with less text, but we don't really know how to do that, and like ditch our worry because we feel kind of like the habit of using the text to communicate things, and even if we try drawing, it's like, hey, no. We need the caption, otherwise we're losing it. And so the question is, what's your experience with text? Because I see something like this, and it has very few text, and it already conveys a message. But other drawings you were showing had a lot more text, and I would love to know, like, how do you go about like mixing text and drawings?
I think it's something that you have to. You can only do it by prototyping, and so if we make a drawing that has to stand on its own, and it should be able to present itself unaccompanied, then you would really have to, in that process we usually make a sketch, and then we show it to the people who give the assignment to us, and then they have suggestions, we improve it, then we say, okay, maybe we should take it to a bigger audience to show it to some people who are not involved in the process, see if that works, and then you kind of
test.
And you can also really test for what kind of things do you want to hear back from people. We want to interview them afterwards and ask, what are the key points of this presentation? And I mean, creating the right visual, having a coherent structure, creating hierarchy in the story, and it can really produce a narrative. But some things are. It's always your story has to be. It's usually a multidimensional one, and you should use all those channels when possible. I actually think that the combination of somebody explaining something and having visuals as a backup is a really strong way of doing that. And leaving blanks and that you draw in while interacting with your audience, that's even more powerful. So there are different levels of engagement that you would want to achieve, and each kind of goal that you have with the visual, you would have to pick different methods.
Yeah, it's really important what you say. What goal and what do you think will happen to your poster? Will people stand there in front of it and read there for 20 minutes? No, probably not.
Right.
Will you be there to say, hey, this looks interesting, somebody says it, and then you can elaborate on a specific detail.
Should they give suggestions to maybe or something
to
improve you, or do you leave a space where they can fill in their telephone number?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's right. So people in the conference, we kind of like prototype, right? And they ended up reading much less than what we thought they would, and they were all academics, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but we don't know whether less text is always better. Just like in your visual thinking prototyping experience, is it the case that if you have less text, drawings tend to function better, or is text sometimes like desirable? Because I think like in the research field, we will love the text. Like you'll have the drawing, and you'll want to put text on the side, right? But we don't know if that works, right?
Yeah.
It's about, it's like a little funnel, it's like a sales funnel. You have to get people through the stages. Only at this point they will read the full text you've written in your PDF.
Right.
If you present the full text in this phase, they will leave it. People are really filtering, certainly in this era of ever more information, and you have a really strong filter of what you do and what you don't read or view. So in this phase you have a very simple ID. Oh, that's interesting. Going to change from square to triangle. Let's read a little bit more about the background, and then you funnel people towards your end goal. But maybe it's not your end goal to have them read the whole thing. Maybe you just want to have a specific reaction, input, or
that's exactly what you. Also, when you have an overview of abstract terms in your poster, then you can also, if you're not around to explain it, people are interested in one part, because it's so abstract, they can go into details and details and details on only one part of the poster.
Right.
Yeah, but maintaining clarity and depth at the same time is really difficult. But I mean, it's like basically if you go on a date, you don't want to read your whole biography to this other person that you're trying to draw in, you know?
I think this is a very good example.
No, but you want to ask questions also, and you want to create a stepping stone for them to come towards you, to ask them, to give them an assist to ask you a question that you would like to answer, and it's the whole,
I always perceive dating as a salesman.
It's kind of creepy. Yeah, Mark, can you tell us something?
No.
Really interesting, like while you guys were talking, I literally see like arrows and things like now. It's really interesting to because I suck at drawing things. I thought I did, but now putting things into perspective makes it really, really interesting to see how we actually think, right? Like when you said, okay, let's have some beers, and then I literally saw our
Visual mind is a joy forever. Anything else?
So maybe.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Closing notes. We'd love to thank the guys from Jongens and Tekeningen. Thank you so much for being here. just as a final message, what we really believe in is this idea of experimentation, of prototyping things out once we've identified a problem. And let's say we're pretty convinced that this gap between research and practice exists, and in the global south it tends to be even more intense than in other contexts. And so we would be delighted to hear about your experiences or opinions on this topic. What kinds of things do you believe could help bridge the gap between research and practice, specifically for the field of public policy? And we'd like to thank you for coming here. And once again, thanks for your understanding for the tight space. The forum was occupied by another event from the Hertie School, and this is the best thing we could get. And thanks again to the HSA for the support. And we wish you all the best. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Thank you.